Good morning,
Good
ma'am.
morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning,
Good
ma'am.
morning, ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay, very good morning.
Good
Very
morning,
nice,
ma'am.
very nice to hear you. Yeah.
Same to you.
So I will introduce myself. I am Dr. Pallavi Kanthe from Department of Physiology. I am working as a faculty in the Department of Physiology. So today we will be discussing on the subject topic, that is body fluids and its compartments. So shall we start?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Slide number one. Okay. So you are very much aware of this fact that water is the most vital factor and it is abundant component of our human body. You are aware of this fact, and you are also knowing that the major part of our human body is composed of water. So it constitutes about the 70% of the total body weight. And in this, in water, we will be referring this water as a total body water. In this total body water, major cations like sodium, potassium, calcium, and anions like chloride, bicarbonate, proteins, these are dissolved. So without water, there will be no life. You know this fact? So the person can survive without food for several weeks, but without water, he cannot survive. So we have to understand this fact very well. So the body fluid is very important aspect of human body. So this, as I told already, it is forming almost 70% of the total body weight. So if you consider a normal adult male, then the 60% of the body weight is formed of water. Suppose the adult man, he is weighing about 70 kg. So his body will be consisting how much amount of water? It is approximately 42 liters.
42.
Yes. When you compare gender wise, so females will be having lesser compared to the male. So approximately 50% of body weight is formed by water, and this is less, like 10% less compared to the male. So the reason behind it is the females are having more fat percent comparatively to the males. That's why that is replaced lesser amount of water. Okay, and in children, the water content is higher. It is approximately 70% of the body weight. Here, the fat is considered as a body surface area. And in aged people, the total body water is comparatively less. So, all these statements, how we derived is, in olden days, the people have measured this body water. Actually, we cannot measure this body water directly. There are the indirect techniques they have used, but in the olden days, the scientists, they have used direct method, and the direct method they have done by the process of desiccation. So you are aware of this fact, desiccation. What is meant by desiccation? So the desiccation process, it is the like removal of water content from the body or the moisture from the body, and after drying they are measuring the water content. So this is very much crude process they have used. Who has done this method is in the year uh, uh, approximately like 1863. The Bischoff, he was the scientist who has measured this total body water content by direct method. So it is they have attempted to measure this in the year 1863 by Bischoff. So he has measured this water content in an executed criminal. by the process of desiccation. So this was an attempt made by them to come to the conclusion of the percentage of body water in a human being. Then this figure depicts that, and the intention behind showing this figure is that just you'll have a look. The first one is a neonate. Here the percentage of body water is 80% compared to its body surface area, and in infant 70%. So gradually it is becoming lesser. In children, the age is 5 years old, it is approximately 65%, and in adult male and female it is 60% and 50% comparative respectively. Okay, so this figure is depicting the percentage of total body weight according to the surface area also and according to the gender also. Now, coming to this important aspect, so this total body water, it can be studied easily by its compartments. So, there are mainly two compartments for this measurement. One is intracellular fluid compartment and another one is extracellular fluid compartment. And this compartment is made by the cell membrane. So, cell membrane is forming a boundary between these two compartments. So no doubt the name is depicting intracellular fluid compartment means the fluid which is present in the cell is called intracellular fluid compartment, and the fluid which is present outside the cell, it is called as extracellular fluid compartment. So here cell membrane is forming a boundary. So here you consider this circle as a cell. Here this part is intracellular fluid and the remaining part is extracellular fluid. So intracellular fluid is forming 2/3 of total body water, whereas extracellular fluid is forming 1/3 of total body water. And the total body water is distributed throughout the body with the means of these two compartments, intracellular and extracellular. Now, coming to this next fact, that is, we will study in detail about this extracellular fluid compartments. Here, in this compartment, the fluid which is present, it is distributed heterogeneously. Heterogeneously means it is not uniformly distributed. According to the body size and place, they have distributed, and it is not a continuous fluid in the compartment, in this compartment. So the scientists Edelman and Liebman in the year 1959, they have studied thoroughly about the distribution or the pattern of this body water by the dilution technique method, and after they have come to the conclusion, they have displayed that around this much amount of fluid is distributed in this compartment. So what are those compartments in extracellular fluid itself are? They have distributed like this. One is transcellular fluid, next is dense connective tissue and cartilage water, and next is plasma, and the remaining is interstitial fluid along with lymph. So these are the sub-compartments of the extracellular compartments. Why? Because, as I said, the extracellular fluid is heterogeneously distributed and it is not uniformly placed in the extracellular fluid. So to study in an easy manner, they have studied and they have displayed these sub-compartments. So before going in detail, this plasma, do you know the fact about this plasma? What is meant by plasma? Anyone? So all are muted. So this plasma, it is
Without corpuscles.
what? Can you repeat it once again?
Blood without corpuscles.
Yes.
Blood without clotting factors.
Yeah.
It is a
Both
liquid
are
portion of
correct.
blood.
Yes.
Other cellular components.
It is the viscous fluid, colorless part of the blood.
Yes. So right now we will just consider it is a fluid part of the blood except the cells. Just for this purpose, we will remember and it is forming approximately 7.5% of the extracellular fluid. Then the transcellular fluid, it is approximately 2.5%. And what are the fluid or what are the things are coming under this heading? Before that, you should know that what is mean by transcellular fluid. The fluid which is present in a cavity which is lined by epithelium, that cavity is called that fluid is called as transcellular fluid. So example of this is cerebrospinal fluid, then synovial fluid, intraocular fluid, peritoneal and pleural fluid, and some GI secretions and fluid in the urinary tract. These all are coming under the heading transcellular fluid. Later, it is a dense connective tissue along with cartilage water, then interstitial fluid with lymph. So interstitial fluid is what? The fluid which is present in between the cells, like the space between two cells is called interstitial space, and the fluid present in that space is called interstitial fluid along with lymph. So it is forming approximately 20% of this extracellular fluid. So these are the compartments, and it is very, very important. You should remember this factor. And then coming to this intracellular fluid, this compartment is containing neither a continuous nor a homogeneous phase of the total body water. It represents the sum of the fluid which content of all the cells of the body. All the cells of the body, I repeat it. The fluid, which it is the sum of the fluid, contains of all the cells of the body, and it holds about 55% of the whole body water. So it is comparatively more compared to the extracellular fluid. Are you clear up to this, everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, so we have learned about the two compartments of the body fluids, that is intracellular and extracellular. So these compartmental fluid will be exchanging. Okay, it will be continuously moving to maintain the homeostasis of the body, to maintain the functions and metabolic process of the body. So these two factors, the compartments, they are like under control of certain things. What are these things are? Like there are certain pressures, they are making the fluid to move from one compartment to another compartment. So what are these? I have listed out few. One is capillary hydrostatic pressure, then colloidal osmotic pressure. This colloidal osmotic pressure is nothing but the pressure exerted by the proteins which are present in the fluid. So this is called colloidal osmotic pressure. Then the hydrostatic pressure in the interstitial fluid and the colloidal osmotic pressure of the interstitial fluid. So these are the some factors which are causing the intercompartmental movement of the total body water. So the thing is, it is making the homeostasis, or it is maintaining the normal functioning of the human body throughout the human. Now, coming to this, another important aspect of this topic is measurement of body fluid volumes. So, basically, this measurement of body fluid volumes depends upon two principles. The one is indicator dilution principle, and the another one is volume distribution principle. Volume distribution principle. A stands for the amount of substance injected intravenously. Means what? The known amount of substance is injected. Then later on, the C is, it is the final concentration of the substance which is derived, and the V is the volume in which the substance is distributed. So with the help of this formula, the measurement of body fluid occurs. So I will repeat it once again. The indicator dilution principle depends upon this formula. What is that? V is equal to A by C. So here A stands for the amount of substance injected intravenously. So this amount is given, known amount of the substance is given intravenously. Later on, after some time, the concentration of the substance is derived, and if you divide these two factors, the volume in which the substance is distributed can be calculated. So the second principle is volume distribution. Same thing here, the amount injected minus the amount removed or excreted divided by final concentration of the substance. This is about the volume distribution principle. So here, indicator dilution principle, in that the whatever dye or indicator we are using, it should have some qualities, it should have some properties. So what it should have? So this dye, it should be non-toxic to the human. It should not make any adverse effect because we are going to inject the certain amount intravenously. So the person should not have any toxic effect after injecting this. And next is, it should be known subject or known dye, and it should remain in the body without changing its own properties. If it is going on changing its property, we cannot come to the conclusion. And later, it should have the minimum life, half-life in a human body. Okay, so that it should not get metabolized so early, or it should not be excreted so early. So it has a half-life in a body. So these are the some properties of this indicator or dye before using. And this is the indirect technique. We are not using any direct technique to measure the body fluid. So as it is the indirect method, that's why we are totally depending upon this formula. Okay. Now, with different compartments, we will be measuring the body fluid. The first thing what we will measure is determination of total body water. So this total body water, it can be measured by using the principle indicator dilution method. So this total body water can be measured by using indicator dilution method. So no doubt, if we are measuring by this method, we require some dyes, known indicators or dyes. So what are those? I have listed out here. One is deuterium oxide. It is called, the formula is D2O, and it is also called as heavy water. So it is predominantly used to measure the total body water. And the next one is tritium oxide and the aminopyrite. So by using these known indicators, we can measure the total body water by using indicator dilution principle. Then the next compartment is determination of extracellular fluid volume. This extracellular fluid volume, it can be measured by two dilution methods. Here we can use the two dilution methods. In that, we can use the indicators like inulin. So you are knowing this inulin. Inulin is a polysaccharide which is easily available, and it has a very less toxic effect on a human body. So it is more predominantly preferred to measure the extracellular fluid volume. Then we can use sucrose, mannol, thiosulfate, thiocyanate, ferrocyanide. These are the certain agents we can use to determine extracellular fluid volume by two dilution method. Next is to measure the plasma volume. To measure this plasma volume, what we required is, here also we can use the volume distribution principle. And for this method, we can use Evans blue very predominantly. Later, we can use the, next we can use radioiodinated human albumin and diiodinated gamma globulin. These are the certain agents we can prefer to determine the plasma volume. Here also we can use the two dilution methods also. And in this, the radioisotopes can be used because, as I said, these are the two methods, two dilution methods, where we can come to the direct conclusion of this plasma volume. And the predicted formula for this is plasma volume is equal to 100 minus PCV. This PCV is nothing but a packed cell volume. Here the hematocrit value of the RBC is taken into consideration into total blood volume and divided by 100. This part we can learn in a better way when we talk about the RBCs. Okay, in practicals also we can learn in detail about this. So till now you just remember that the plasma volume, it can be determined by dilution method by using the agents like Evans blue, radioiodinated human albumin, diiodinated gamma globulin with respect to this formula, that is plasma volume divided is equal to 100 minus packed cell volume divided by 100 into blood volume. So this is the formula you can use for this. The next is the determination of interstitial fluid volume. Here, the interstitial fluid volume, it cannot be measured directly as it is difficult to sample out. The substance that equilibrates in interstitial fluid, it also equilibrates in plasma. That is the reason in the formula we are using the plasma volume to determine the interstitial fluid volume. So you can derive by using this extracellular fluid volume minus plasma volume. Why we have taken plasma into consideration? Because the substance which is equilibrating in the interstitial fluid also it is equilibrates in the plasma content. So it is easier or convenient to use the plasma volume to determine interstitial fluid volume. So it is the difference between these two factors. So by this way, we can determine the interstitial fluid volume. The next one is determination of intracellular fluid volume, that is ICF. So it is very easy how to measure. So the formula is depicted here is total body water content minus extracellular fluid volume. Same thing for this intracellular fluid volume also, we cannot measure directly by any principle like dilution principle, as we have learned that there is no substances remain confined to this compartment. So it is difficult to say that this is the compartment which is remaining for this intracellular fluid volume. That's why they have used as an indirect method to determine is total body water minus extracellular fluid volume to determine the ICF value. Now, another important aspect of this topic is ionic composition of body fluid. So, in this body fluid, in these two compartments, there are certain charged particles present. So these charged particles are called as electrolytes also. So charged particles, they are in terms of cations or anions, and these are distributed in the body throughout the compartments. And one point here you focus here is the sum of the concentration of cation, it equals the sum of the concentration of anions in the respective compartments. The sum of the cation in the ECF is equal to the sum of the anions in the ICF, like that. So this electrolyte composition is maintained equal throughout the compartments. Because of this is causing the electrolyte neutrality. Then we can call that the fluid, the body fluid is in isotonic in nature. The body fluid is in isotonic. The tonicity is maintained throughout the body fluids with respect to their compartments. So here you can see that the cation, sum of the cation is 115 ECF, whereas the sum of the anion is also 150. Here in the ICF, the sum of the cation is 180. Here it should be 180. It is a typographical mistake. And whereas the sum of the anion in ICF is also 180. So the sum is maintained and the electrolyte is maintained equally in both the sides to maintain the isotonicity. And here the sodium, potassium, calcium, bicarbonate, these are mainly present in the ECF, whereas the potassium, magnesium, and other organic phosphates are present in the ICF predominantly. And essentially, here I want to tell two important factors like sodium and potassium. So essentially, almost all the potassium in the body is in the exchangeable pool. So it is at a random exchangeable pool, whereas sodium is about 60 to 65% in an exchangeable pool. So hence, these two electrolytes, they are called osmotically active ions. They are called osmotically active ions. See, when you will be learning about transport across cell membrane, then that time you are coming across these factors. So you should know the about you should know about the cations, their electrolyte charges, and which compartment is having more cations, anions, and which compartment is having more with its amount. Okay, so this is very, very important factor. And I think in next few days you will be learning about transport across cell membrane. That time you can understand very neatly. So these electrolytes, they are charged particles, and whenever we are using these terms, we are coming across certain units. So it is also an important aspect of this topic, so that you should know what is meant by what. So units for this solutes are, the first one is mole. So this mole is defined as the gram molecular weight of a substance. The mole is defined as gram molecular weight of a substance. So each mole, it consists approximately 6 into 10 raised to 23 molecules. And these molecules are known as Avogadro's number. This is a Viva question and it can be asked as a multiple choice question for you. So I will repeat it once again. What is meant by mole? It is a gram molecular weight of a substance, and each mole consists of about 6 into 10 raised to 23 molecules, and these are known as Avogadro's number. So for example, you can understand it better way. The 1 mole of potassium chloride is approximately 74.5, means the 74.5 grams, it is a gram molecular weight of potassium chloride. Then coming to the next unit is equivalence. So this equivalent is the 1 mole of an ionized substance divided by its valency. So example, you can understand here better way. So 1 equivalent of calcium is equal to, you know, the gram molecular weight of calcium is 40 grams and its valency is 2. So 40 into 40 divided by 2 is 20 grams. So 1 equivalence of calcium is 20 grams. The next unit is normality. Normality of a solution is the gram equivalence in 1 liter. So all these terms, units, you are coming across during practical hours. So we will be learning these terms in detail in practicals when you will be learning about the behavior of RBC in different tonic solutions. So that time you will be coming across these terms. The next is osmolarity. The osmolarity is number of osmoles, active osmoles per liter of solution. Here the liter word is used, whereas osmolality, here the number of osmoles, active osmoles per kilogram of solutions. Here the kilogram term is used. So I will repeat it once again. Osmolarity, it is number of osmoles per liter of solution. Here the liter is considered. And osmolality, here the number of osmoles per kilogram of solutions. So these were some terms or units for this. Okay, any doubt?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now, coming to this applied aspect of this topic. Here, it is dehydration. So, we will be seeing some clinical aspect of this topic. So, dehydration, you are coming across this word many times. We tell no, many times we are dehydrated. What it means actually, it is the loss of body water. Because of this, what happens? Decline in the body water level occurs. So this loss of body water, it can be a simple water loss or it can be a loss of body fluids along with electrolytes. Okay, so you are feeling this dehydration during the very hot days. Okay, there will be loss of water with along with the electrolytes. When that time you can feel the dehydration. Okay. So apart from that, what are the other causes for dehydration is mainly diarrhea, vomitings, excessive sweating due to the weather changes. Then in burn cases, the fluid is lost, and certain clinical diseases like Addison's diseases, diabetes mellitus and diabetes insipidus. These two diseases, in diabetes mellitus and insipidus, there is an excessive loss of water through urination. Because of that, the person, in sometimes the person feels dehydrated. So when the dehydration is severe, you can see certain features on a human being. So what are those features? There is a loss of skin elasticity. Okay, because of the dehydration, the tonicity of the skin is lost. That term is called turgor. That term is called turgor. Here you can appreciate nicely. The elasticity of the skin is lost due to the severe dehydration, and this is called turgor. And how you will examine this turgor? So just gently pinch the skin or pull it up so that the skin will remain in a pulled position, and after for some times it will come back to its normal texture. Okay, so this is about the turgor. So another features, what will happen in this dehydration? So extracellular fluid volume is decreased due to the increased osmotic pressure and exosmosis. What is meant by exosmosis? As I said, the extracellular level is decreased, means the fluid which is present in extracellular compartment is decreased. To maintain that balance, the intracellular fluid is withdrawn. Okay, it is pulled outside so that the body is making attempt to bring outside from the cellular content. This process is called exosmosis. Because of that exosmosis process, the cell gets shrunken because the fluid is coming out of the cell. Because of that, the cell is shrinked. Then the water retention in the body will try to retain water. It will not allow to excrete through the urine. That's why the anti-urination will be there. So body will try to maintain its homeostasis by balancing the body fluid in both the compartments. So it will retain the body fluid and it will not allow to filtrate through this renal tubules, and the scanty urination will be there. And some features like when there is a loss of water, along with that electrolytes are also lost. Because of that, the person is restless and acidosis. These are the certain features which the dehydrated person can feel. Now, another very, very important aspect of this topic is edema. So what is meant by edema? In common term, it is called as swelling. The swelling is known as edema, but what is the reason behind this is it is excessive abnormal accumulation of fluid in the interstitial spaces. So we have learned about what is interstitial space. The space between the cells is called interstitial space. So when there is excessive accumulation of fluid occurs in such spaces, then that term is called edema. So what is the limit of this? When the body fluid start accumulating more than 30%. Okay, then it start swelling and it is called edema. So there are two types of edema. One is intracellular edema, another one is extracellular edema. So we will be more focusing on this extracellular edema, where the edema is mostly seen in extracellular fluid. So there are certain causes why this is happening. So the first is, as I said in my previous slide, that there are certain pressures or factors which are controlling over the intracompartmental fluid transportation. So when there is any alteration in these factors, then it may turn into pathological thing. So the first one we will be seeing is increase in capillary hydrostatic pressure. So whenever there is an increase in capillary hydrostatic pressure, the fluid starts getting accumulated in the extracellular fluid compartment. So what are the conditions where the increase in capillary hydrostatic pressure is seen? One is atrial dilatation. Second one is increase in venous pressure and increase in blood volume. So these are certain things where the capillary hydrostatic pressure is increased. The second one is decreased colloidal osmotic pressure. So as I told, colloidal osmotic pressure, it is the pressure exerted by the proteins. So where the colloidal osmotic pressure is decreased, it is mainly decreased in malnutrition, where the protein deficiency occurs mainly. And next is liver diseases, certain liver diseases. And the third one is nephrotic syndrome, where the colloidal osmotic pressure is decreased. The next one is increased permeability of the capillary membrane. You should understand the term. What is meant by increased permeability of the capillary membrane means the capillary membrane become very thin and fragile, so that the fluid can transport very easily from one compartment to another compartment. In future, it may start causing accumulation and it is causing the swelling. So what are the conditions which is making the increased permeability of the capillary? One is inflammation. During certain inflammation, the permeability of the capillary membrane increases, and in certain allergic conditions and other immunity disorders where the permeability of the capillary membrane increases, so that the membrane becomes fragile and it will easily allow the fluid to come across, okay, which is causing accumulation over the spaces. Then the last one is lymphatic obstruction. Any inflammation or infection to the lymphatic vessels, it causes the obstruction, and so that the lymph cannot be easily transported through. So this can lead to the edematous condition over the site. So this is called lymphatic obstruction. So these all are collective positive factors for this edema. Now, we can study this edema with another types, that is pitting and non-pitting edema. So pitting and non-pitting, you should know the difference. When we depress the skin with gentle pressure, then the depression occurs over there, and this depression after some times it may come to the normal position. So this is called pitting edema, and the another one is non-pitting edema. Here, when you depress over that edematous part, it will not make a depression. So that is called as non-pitting edema. So these are the another two types of edema. One we have learned, according to the compartments. Another one is pitting and non-pitting edema. Okay, so here you can see the best example for the non-pitting edema in endocrine disorder. See here, over the this side below the eye, here it is a edematous part, and the person face is looking a puffy. So this is about the non-pitting edema. Okay, so we are at the conclusion of this lesson. So again, when you people will be coming here, after coming back, coming to the college, we will be learning this in tutorials, like small group discussion or in a self-directed learning. Again, we will revise this topic in detail. So we will conclude here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.